Have you found compost really expensive this year? Do you want to save some money? A great tip to start saving that you can start now. Composting isn't as complicated as what some people make you believe. It can be easily done in a very small space using plastic Daleks, pallets, or even open ground or paths. There are many ways to do this. One of the ways we do is with our compost bin. Now, last year we actually managed to get a fair bit of compost made. This bin was green waste and kitchen scraps that we used throughout the whole of the year. Making friends out of local gardeners and local wood chippers and tree surgeons helped us create a great amount of compost. But it's something that everybody can do. Adding our green waste, which can be easily collected from home. This is just a couple of days for us. Now, it's a mixture of old bananas, orange peel, onions, potato peelings. All these will happily go on your compost bin. You've also got grass clippings, wood chippings that are very, well, the finer you can get the wood chippings, the better. For us now, our chicken coop sawdust and our chicken poop, even coffee grounds, fresh manure, all this can go on your compost bins. Just never put meat or cooked ingredients on your compost bin. You will get rats. So this is the bin that we started early this year. Things like this really does need to be cut down, even smashed up to some degree. This will break down the cells in the stem and it will make it rot much, much quicker. So this will go into my chopping bucket for me to give it a really good chop and a bash. Over time, this will start rotting down. But there is a magic ratio to compost. Now, this is where most people get really confused, but it really is simple. How we did it last year was a 50-50 mix. Now, at first, I racked my brains out thinking, what's a 50-50 mix? Because the different ratios of green to brown can be really important. Now, is it ratio by size? Some items might be bulkier, might be a lot more. Some might be a lot finer. So I kind of figured on doing the greens a few centimetres deep and the browns a little bit deeper at a time in layers. But I don't get caught up in layers. It will get put on how it gets put on. In general, we only turn once, maybe twice a year. But you can turn it as often as you're willing. But the bigger the pile you have, the harder it actually gets to start turning. It definitely brings out a sweat. Getting started now is great. You'll have time to add on to this mix as the year goes through. If you leave it too late, sometimes you'll end up with far too much of either green or brown. So starting it early on in the season while you still have access to brown, like leaves, maybe a bit of wood chip, even cardboard. This will actually help you build your layers as you get more green coming on to the late spring, early summer. Now, at certain times of the year, you may struggle with certain ingredients for your compost bin, but certain weeds are starting to show their ugly head on our plots. And the tops and even the roots, if you can get a hot enough compost pile, make great additions. This is part of a little bit of a mix that we started at the beginning of this year, a much smaller heap. We had some old leaves and some very finely wood chipped. And already you can see that this has started to break down. And in fact, you can see the little worms in it. Now, I'm going to add some of this from my wheelbarrow into this mix. Worms are a great benefit to your compost bins, but don't worry about introducing them. They will always find a way into your compost bins. Now, giving it a little turn is a good thing, but don't feel that you have to turn your compost bins all the time. The reason I'm turning this compost bin is because the lower materials have been there for quite a while. So this new stuff that I brought in, that's already started to decompose somewhat, will be really good to mix in with the stuff that's just been sitting there. Adding a little bit of water to it will really help it speed its way. Now, we add water to ours because, again, we have a roof. But if you've got yours in an open site, you may actually have to cover it with some plastic or some bags or something like that to keep it a little bit drier, because it may end up getting too wet and becoming anaerobic. And anaerobic is something that you don't want. But having a sheet of cardboard or plastic or some old bags or hessian, anything like that, will help keep the heat in, and it will help break down that material much quicker. So this little introduction to compost making, yes, it can be much more scientific and complicated, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Just know your greens and your brown material. This will help you create your layers to create the best way to break down those materials. You'll end up with some lovely chunky compost, which will be perfect for your beds, pots and borders. Starting your compost heap now is a great way to benefit in the near future from great nutrient-rich compost. Why don't you give composting a try? To know more about compost, there is some great books and advice out there. Just don't be afraid that it's too complicated. A lot of the times people's compost failures, or the long time that it can take some people to get their compost mix completed, because of the wrong ratios to materials used. But everybody can make their own compost. Why don't you start your compost bin today? It doesn't have to be complicated. You can also make compost in pathways by layering in your paths compost materials to break down over time, which then, as it breaks down and becomes compost, you can then just literally dig up that path and start again. Everybody can make their own little bit of compost, and who wouldn't want that really good home grown compost to spread on your beds?